Today on Tricrow Studios, we do a high gain amp shootout between the PV6505 Plus and the Mesa Boogie Nomad 55. I would like to reiterate here that this is a high gain amp shootout. That's why it's titled that way. So you're not going to hear any cleans, you're not going to hear any breakups, it's just high gain geared towards metal. I'd also like to note that both amps here are boosted with an Ibanez TS9 for the first sound sample only. But I do have two sound samples for you today, both of which are actually in drop B for some reason. The first of which is a somewhat balanced EQ setting, whereas the second is a little more on the scoop side. Alright, so there you go. There are the two sound samples for the high gain amp shootout between the PV6505 Plus and the Mesa Boogie Nomad 55. Now there's two very specific things that I'll more than likely get asked in the comments section. Number one, the PV6505 Plus that I have here is made in the USA. They moved everything over to China. And then they, I believe, kept the same components. It was just made in China from that point on. I think they changed the components for the 6505 too, but I think it's still made in China. And the second one, why am I not using the Mesa Boogie Nomad 100? It's because I don't own a Nomad 100. So there is a 100 watt head, and it does actually have an EQ section. So EQ sliders, a 5-band EQ in there. They rarely come up on the used market, and when they do, they're for outrageous prices, and then it's funny because no one ever buys it, so they usually go for about $900 to $1,000 for the 100 watt. But it is at this point in the video where I kind of like to go over what I've gained from doing a shootout like this, and I did have my suspicions here. Because the Nomad 55, I don't know why, but I kind of think of it as when it's boosted, at least in a balanced EQ setting, it's really good for like punk rock. So I thought I would hear some nice distortion along with a very nice and crisp midsection with a little bit more emphasis on the high end. The low end is kind of touch and go, I find, with the Nomad 55. It's either very present or there's too much of it. And it is, I feel, one amp that you really, really should be using a boost for it to kind of smooth out that low end so you can actually dial a lot more in rather than basically almost taking it out of the signal. And of course, when it came to the 6505 Plus, I just find that if you boost it and skew the high end and then bring your mids to, I don't know, about 230-ish, 230-ish, and you bring your low end to about like between 12:30 and 1 o'clock, it's just a really, really good balanced sound. And it has that really nice low mid to it that will also allow you, especially when not being boosted. It's not an amp that needs a boost, but I've been playing around with it a lot lately and I kind of enjoy it. It gives it a little more energy. But in a scooped setting, the 6505 Plus I find does just as well as it does when it's in a balanced EQ setting, and I think that a lot of that has to do with the low mids that are built into the amp. So even if you're dialing them out, they still kind of shine through to give you a little bit of presence in there. And again, very notable here, the Nomad 55 in the scoop setting where it was not boosted, the low end just sounded flubby and tubby and a little bit chubby. Which may or may not work for what you're going for, but I do find that in like a fuller mix, because I'm not using bass here, it's kind of there for no reason and can kind of take away from the signal. And of course, we're talking about a PV amp here, so I'm about to annoy some PV amp users. I own 5 PV amps. If you are looking to purchase a PV amp on the used market, I do highly recommend that you pick up a can of contact cleaner. It's about $8 or $9. Set yourself aside about a half an hour with some screwdrivers. What tends to happen with PV amps a lot faster than other amps, although it has not happened to the 6505 Plus that I own, but 4 other PV amps, they have. What ends up happening is the PV amps, their potentiometers tend to get dirtier faster than other amps. So what I find is it's around a year and a half to 2 years that you have that amp and you start to get the crackly pots. So that's when you turn it and you hear. What can really happen and be a bigger pain is if that happens to either your volume or your gain control. What it can do is it can actually cut out the signal. It can create some major dead spots there. I have a JSX that I famously did not use for about a year because I was too lazy to fix things, and it was so bad that there was a lot of, basically anywhere where the gain sounded good, I would start playing and then the signal would start to deteriorate a little bit and it would come in and come out. So yeah, it's not that big of a deal. You just pull the chassis out. That's why I say get the screwdrivers. And then spray that contact cleaner in the little hole that's in the back of the potentiometer. And then you start wiggling them around. And then that cleans all the contacts inside. And then your amp, once you've done that to all of them, should be as good as new for like a year and a half to 2 years, maybe a little longer. It's not that big of a deal. However, it is something I do really feel that everyone should know if they are looking to purchase a PV on the used market. But that is all I really have to say. I consider myself very, very lucky to own both of these amps and, of course, all of the gear that I do own. And the Nomad 55, just like the F100, I do feel, I think it's probably because I have the dual rectifier, the Road King 1, the Mark 5, the Mark 4. Those two amps seem to get neglected a little bit, so I think I might start bringing them in a little more in some shootouts. Thanks for watching.